For my older adult interview, I interviewed my great aunt Ruthie. She is 11 years younger than my paternal grandmother, who passed away on July 31st of 2010. During the interview, I focused on the industry versus inferiority stage of development. According to Erikson, during this stage, children are developing a sense of satisfaction that comes from completing a task successfully. The child's relationship with others is important during this stage of development. There is a lot of emphasis in society today placed on gender roles, where it is becoming more acceptable for a woman to encompass roles that traditionally are completed by males. It is less accepting for men to encompass roles that are traditionally filled by females. During the industry versus inferiority stage of development, many people don't see an issue with young girls playing football or racing bikes or doing other things that traditionally young boys do. Going out, getting dirty, playing in the mud, and things of that nature. However, in today's society, it still isn't socially acceptable for a boy to play house, play dress up, or even play with dolls, even during the industry versus inferiority stage. It's essential for a child to develop a feeling of self, to learn who they are. During the stage of development for my aunt, it was very different growing up on a farm. Her parents were equal opportunity, according to her. During the interview, she said, "For starters, my parents were equal opportunity parents. I had to drive a farm tractor when I was 4. I couldn't work the clutch because I was too little, but my father managed to work the clutch. When you're on a farm and need to help, and no one is around to help, someone has to do things." From a young age, my great aunt fed and milked cows, assisted in plowing a field, would go with my great grandfather from Greentown to Clark Summit on the train to help pick up feed. She didn't help my great grandmother tend to the house and do things that a mother in that era would traditionally do. She didn't learn how to cook at a young age, and when she became a mother and a wife herself, learned how to cook from a cookbook. She would assist with other household chores, such as cleaning around the house and doing some of the more basic gardening. But she also did the tasks that boys and men were expected to do. In a lot of cases in society, even at a young age during industry, during inferiority, when a child's learning to complete tasks, as far as gender today, as it relates to back then, there isn't a difference in the tasks that a boy would do as opposed to what a girl would do. That's very different and situational for somebody that is raised on a farm. As I stated, she typically did chores that a male member of her family would do. Parents and teachers reinforce the gender norms that society wants to impress on young children. The society that she grew up in was combined of farmers, grist mill workers, teachers, secretaries, and clergymen. It's very rural in northeastern Pennsylvania where she grew up. So the values that were impressed upon her during the industry versus inferiority stage were very different from what would be impressed upon a child who grew up in a suburban or urban area. During this stage of life, it was very instrumental in helping her gain confidence for a leadership role she filled later in life. The confidence she gained in the industry versus inferiority stage assisted her when she became a EMS dispatcher and later an volunteer EMT. She also became the main administrator, the chief executive, chief financial officer of a family-owned land development company that her husband did the land development for. And in retirement, she's also become the president of the local historical society and has also taken the lead in the genealogical research for the historical society. The area in Pennsylvania that she lives in was founded by four families whom I am related to and who she is obviously related to. And she learned the confidence during the industry and inferiority stage to be able to fill those roles today. She didn't experience a lot of psychological crises when she was growing up. The first major psychological crisis that she actually experienced was in her early teenage years. She was maybe anywhere between 11 and 13 years old when she went with her parents to South Florida on vacation. During that time, having grown up in northeastern Pennsylvania, there were not any African American families. And as far as diversity is concerned, the only people that were ethnically different were Italians. And from a religious perspective, the only individuals who were considered a minority were Catholics. So as far as racial tension, it wasn't experienced until she went to South Florida. That's when she first experienced people using the N-word to describe African Americans. That's where she first experienced racial segregation and saw signs that said for white use only when it referred to restrooms and water fountains. She also saw signs that said blacks are not allowed. To be more crude, the signs used the N-word. She was shocked at this, but wasn't naive to the fact that it was going on. They had a television, and she knew about current events that were occurring. This psychological crisis, although she didn't understand the psychology behind the racism, in a way prepared her for when she first got married in the early 70s. She married a Marine that was stationed at Camp Lejeune, which is located in Jacksonville, North Carolina. She told me that on a weekly basis, one week black Marines were hung on base, and the next it was whites. And this went back and forth. And even though these Marines were literally lynched, thankfully nobody was killed. Now, my great aunt was separated from this and didn't actually see it, although it was occurring. She lived in a mobile home park off base, and she was not um, thankfully involved in what was occurring. She had neighbors who were African American, or as she said, she had blacks that were neighbors. But she didn't think anything of it. She looked at the quality of the person. They were hardworking people who treated her and her family with respect. In her words, they were nice people. As far as a resolution to this psychological crisis, my great grandparents operated a farm. She helped work the farm. There were farms and grist mills. Grist mills are mills that are used for producing grain that ran along the river. And the families were very much an agricultural community. They thrived on hard work. They survived based of based off of the food they were able to produce. She told me that if you didn't grow it, you didn't eat it. A family's livelihood literally meant survival. And in the community, the values that were impressed were hard work and how you treated others. Said there wasn't a lot of diversity. There were Italians and Catholics in her hometown, and that was it. So she didn't quite, like I said, she also didn't understand the psychology of racism. She grew up accepting people for who they were and who they are. While a society may have roles that are seen as male and female, there are subcultures that defy societal norms. While she was growing up, it was a societal norm in the eastern United States, more specifically the southeastern United States, that blacks were treated differently. They were oppressed. They had to sit in certain areas of a bus. They couldn't use certain bathrooms. Thurgood Marshall successfully argued in front of the Supreme Court during this time that separate but equal in education was not separate but equal when he argued Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education. So things were very much viewed as being different. Now, in her community, the morals and values expressed by parents surrounding the roles of men and women were projected onto the children. Her family's morals and values were that you would work hard and it didn't matter what the task was. If it was typically a role tasked to a male, you could still do it. It didn't matter. On the macro level, that was completely different. Women were expected to be teachers, nurses, secretaries, or tend to the family. My aunt said that none of those options appealed to me, so I did my own thing and helped where I could. I was the bookkeeper and executive for a family owned land development business, and I filled leadership roles in my community with the Historical Society and in researching genealogy. I became a strong, independent woman.